It's your Locked On Flyers podcast for Wednesday, April 13th, your daily dose of Flyers news, analysis, and high quality content that figured we might lose to the Caps, but 9-2. Oof.
It was a slobber knocker.
That is a good word. I like it.
Your Locked On Flyers, your daily podcast on the Philadelphia Flyers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hi out there. I am Rachel Donner. You can find me on Twitter at rmiriam. I'm here as always with my partner in crime, Russ Cohen. He is on Twitter at Sportsology. Thanks for making us your first listen every day. You can follow us on Twitter at Locked On Flyers. Keep up to date on all the Flyers news and our episodes. You can also email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. We are doing a mailbag on tomorrow's show, so get those questions in first thing this morning as we're recording that pretty early. On today's show, we are going to have to talk about that game last night against the Washington Capitals. It was brutal. But we do have some stuff that I think we can take away from it moving forward. So we're going to try and focus on that a little bit. We've got a Flyers Rangers preview for tonight. And then our prospect profile we're doing today is Isaac Howard, who is draft eligible this year. Locked On Flyers is free and available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, wherever you are listening. So subscribe and you'll get all of our episodes here on the Locked On Podcast Network. All right, Russ. So I think it's pretty safe to say that defensive breakdowns is what did the Flyers
Oh
in
my
this
goodness.
one.
Like basically it was like the Caps were like, "Hey, we're just going to go to the net because we see that you're not capable of keeping us out of the crease or stopping a pass going to the net." And they just piled it on, man. And we talked about how much they would use Ovechkin in this game. We talked about how they would try and pile it up. I wasn't shocked that they were going to score as many as they could score. There's no love lost between these two franchises.
No, and I think, pretty much everybody on the blue line for the Flyers made some tragic error in this game,
Yes.
except for maybe Travis Sanheim. I
Yeah,
think
that may
he,
be true.
I think he kind of got away with one in this game a little bit. I mean, obviously, it's a team sport, everybody contributes, but I believe he was, according to Micah McCurdy, who does really
Mhm.
good stat visualizations, he said there was only 4 Flyers that were not on the ice for a goal in the course of this
Yeah,
game, and Travis Sanheim was one of them.
figures Michael would point that out.
Yeah.
I've had him on shows. He's great.
I mean, so I think that is a really good sign that, and that's been a theme for this season that no matter what else is going on there, Travis Sanheim has, made some really strong progress in his
Yes.
game this season. And, the things that he's done well, he's continuing to excel at no matter what is going on around him. And so I think that's a good thing. But looking at everybody else, Cam York made a pretty big mistake on the
Oh
first
yeah.
goal. I thought, and then Ronnie Adder got caught pretty badly on the goal that made it 3-1. And then there was a complete breakdown on the Connor Sherry goal
Oh yeah.
in the second that made it 5-1, where there was literally nobody in front of the net. Like everybody was at least, in the slot or higher, which was it was unbelievable
That was
to
when the
behold.
avalanche started on them. Like
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it was just going to get worse. You could tell it was going to get worse. You just knew it was going to get worse.
Yeah, it was just, I don't know, an avalanche of despair is what I
I just,
would call it.
I there was the moment where you did find it funny that Leah Hextall said that when the Flyers bench was saying, "Why are you putting Ovechkin out there? Don't put him out there. You're just trying to pile it on." And Tom Wilson's like, "But how's he supposed to catch Gretzky?" That's funny. Any day of the week, Leah Hextall is the one who told us that. That is funny, but it's a little weird that the Flyers would actually take that tact. Like, you know what? You knew that this was going to happen. The only way it wasn't going to happen is if you took care of business, and they didn't. So they have nothing to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, and this is, it's not just the Flyers that this happens to. A team gets
No,
frustrated, it gets a little chippy, people want to start a fight, and so I think Joel Farabee and Travis Konechny are the guys that are going to do it,
the only
right?
bad thing about
Because
Farabee,
Zach McEwen's not in this game, so
right?
these are the other two guys that are going to step up in these
The
situations.
only bad thing about Farabee doing it is he already has a bad hand,
Yeah.
and that could really turn into something worse. And that's where you have to almost not do it simply because of that. But he doesn't think about that because he's all heart. I get it, but you got to use your head sometimes.
Well, speaking of Hart and Cam
Yeah,
Atkinson, both of them wound up leaving the game. We knew that both of them were banged up a little bit coming into it, but Atkinson got rocked by Tom Wilson along the boards. I
yeah,
think that also added to the frustration in
sure.
this game that led to emotions overflowing here. And yeah, Hart, you could absolutely tell he just wasn't with it in this game. So
No, the
it was
Ovechkin goal, like the way
yeah,
he, banked it off him,
he would normally have that fine.
he would. Now we have to ask the question because I've been holding back on this one. I know I don't hold back on a lot, but Carter Hart shouldn't play anymore this year. We knew he was banged up 2 weeks ago.
Right.
Like this should be it. Like this should be the warning sign. Like, okay, we got to shut him down because we can't have him hurt for next year.
I agree. And I think that, and this is not my logic, this is what I think the Flyers' logic is that they really feel like they need to keep Felix Sandstrom down in Lehigh Valley for this mythical playoff quest that isn't going to happen. But yet at the same time, he's really like their number one goalie and he's playing well. So they feel like they need to leave him there for that purpose and they can't call him up,
So that's
at
fine. Then
least at
call
the
up.
moment. But I think after this weekend, they have to do it.
Yeah, they have to do it. And look, again, we talked about it. If they really were going to load up on this mythical run, they could have sent more help down. It's not like Noah Cates has to finish out the season with the Flyers. He could have try to help the Phantoms. Same, even with Adder
Hmm.
now, you could still send him down if you wanted to and try and tilt the odds in these games. But they don't seem to have an appetite for that. So it is weird that, like you said, they're going to keep Sandstrom in that. But again, you could put Pat Nagel as the backup to Martin Jones. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if Martin Jones plays the rest of the year. It doesn't matter. But you don't want Carter Hart to get sustain some sort of injury that you weren't expecting that could linger.
That is absolutely true. I agree with you 100% on that front. They should do something about it sooner rather than later. I do want to get to Bobby Brink and his
Yes.
NHL debut. Very important. Glad he got a point on
Hmm.
that power play goal. And I think on the power play, in this game is where you saw the best of Bobby Brink and what he can bring to the Flyers, where he really stood out in terms of, quick, decisive passing.
Hmm.
And he took a couple of shots. And I think that, you could see glimmers of what he could do in this game. Wouldn't say he had a great complete game, but you saw really good moments from him.
Right. You saw some flashes, and even in the third period, he had a nice setup play for Hayes. When he
Hmm.
gets into the offensive zone with the puck, he can be dangerous, like I had talked about. So no, you could see those things are there, and that's a big positive.
So we have to face the Rangers tonight.
And they're going
So
to be angry.
they are going to be quite angry and not want to give one up to the Flyers. So I just hope that the Flyers can stay angry because this was embarrassing and they should not and hopefully will not be embarrassed two nights in a row. And think that's
That's the
what we got to
tact.
hope
I mean,
for.
that's the tact you hope the coach takes in the locker room and even with the media. But I don't know, will he? I don't know.
With HelloFresh, you get farm fresh, pre portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. HelloFresh cuts back on the time spent in the kitchen with meals ready in about 30 minutes or less. Plus, they've got quick and easy meals, including 20-minute recipes, low prep, and easy cleanup options, and provide an even faster route to putting food on your table. HelloFresh offers 50 menu and market items to choose from every week, including veggie, fit and wholesome, family friendly, and gourmet options, providing plenty of variety. I love using HelloFresh because you always get something that tastes incredible and is just the right amount of food for two people, or sometimes I've got a meal for myself and leftovers the next day. Go to HelloFresh.com/LockedOn16 and use the code LockedOn16, that's all one word, for up to 16 free meals and 3 free gifts. That's HelloFresh.com/LockedOn16 and the code LockedOn16. Thanks for making Locked On Flyers your first listen every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Now podcast. It's nightly recaps of every NHL game with analysis from our local experts. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Russ. So we got another game coming up tonight. Of course, second half of this back-to-back. We are facing the New York Rangers. And we saw the Rangers pretty recently on April 3rd, if we recall. That's where the Flyers finally won a shootout game this season, getting the first shootout goal. It felt good at the time. I think in retrospect, I think the lack of shootout wins overall and letting games get to shootouts is a bigger issue for the Flyers, but it was a win nonetheless, and it did feel good against the division rival.
A win is a win is a win, and it was like they overcame something. And yeah, any kind of time you beat a division rival, it's good, no matter what.
It is. Now, since then, the Rangers have gone on to beat the Devils. They shut out the Pens, who were in a bit of a tailspin, I think, and came out of it, but now they got the Malkin suspension, but I digress. Then the Rangers beat Ottawa 5-1, which was their playoff clinching win, which hurts to say so much. And I think, at least for me, I will fully admit, and I've said this before on the show, that I think the Rangers are the team I was the most wrong about this season in the NHL, that I just did not think that Shesterkin would have enough of a season like he's been having to carry them to this point where now the rest of what the Rangers can do is kind of clicking at a much better way than it was, I would say, before trade deadline.
Yeah, I had a good feeling about Shesterkin because I kind of go back to when he was
But enough
playing
that
in
he
the
would
World
carry
Juniors.
this team like this?
Yeah, because he carried them last year to a certain degree too. He did. Plus, they have Georgiev, who, again, that's a big advantage when you have a guy like that who really has a top goalie mentality most of the time when he comes in there and can win some big games too. I felt like that was a big deal, but I didn't know what was going to happen at the deadline. And at the deadline, they filled every right void. And so now they went from, in my mind, being a team that could go maybe to 2 rounds of the playoffs to the conference final. Like that's where I think they could go now.
It's not an unrealistic thought, Russ. I think that you're right. They improved in all the places they needed to. I hope Justin Braun is having a good time.
Well, he's starting to play at least, and they're playing him on the left side, so that's good.
It is good. And if you look at even their underlying metrics, most importantly, those defensive metrics, which had been their biggest problem all season long, their shot suppression is much better. Getting high danger scoring chances against them is much, much harder. I think they went from, bottom 6 or 8 in the league overall to like now they're second in the league since the trade deadline on some of their defensive metrics. So they absolutely did make those improvements that they needed to. And so I think it's going to be an interesting game between these two teams because I think you have quite a number of these young kids on the Flyers who just want to have a shooting gallery, right? And prove their worth and make an impact against a team that has really improved defensively. So I just wonder how that is going to come together in this game.
It'll be interesting because, Keandre Miller, who could have been a Flyer, by the way.
Biggest biggest thing that upsets me about the recent drafting.
He's really developed this year really, really well. Like, again, we all have to remember he started as a forward and he was late playing the position of defense. And I remember interviewing him when he was with the NTDP, and I just saw the size and the speed and the raw ability, and now he's putting it together. He's figuring out how to be a really good defenseman too. That's helped him. Bringing up rookie Braden Schneider has been helping them because he is very physical, but he's also good with the puck and good offensively. So he's going to try and take off a few heads in that Flyers game because that's just what he does. He doesn't know how to do anything else besides being good offensively. And you got Adam Fox, who is Adam Fox. So
of course
they actually, with Braun there now, he was a really good compliment to fill in there. Nemeth, who knows what happens with him if he plays or not. He's a detriment for them, but their defense overall is better. I could see Kapokako being back at that point, and maybe even Kevin Rooney. And Rooney is a big deal for them as far as penalty killing and fourth line. So they beat him the last time, but not with those guys in there. It's going to be a tough game. It's always going to be a tough game anyhow. Rangers Flyers is always going to be a tough game.
Yeah.
But you have to wonder, where are the Flyers' heads at as far as playing in a potential very physical game at this point in the season, where the Rangers are doing it. They're going into the playoffs. They know it. Are the Flyers up to the task? That's the question I would ask.
Well, the other thing too is that even though the Rangers have clinched that playoff position, right now they're neck and neck with the Canes in terms of getting the division championship, right?
Right.
And if the playoffs were to start now, as it currently stands, with the Rangers in the second spot, as we're recording this, they would have to face the Penguins in the first round, which I think for them is a good matchup because they've won this season series. The Pens are the Pens always seem to get it together for the playoffs pretty well, but at the same time, they're in a pretty precarious position right now. And I think with the way this Rangers team has been playing, could be, ripe for the picking. And so for them to kind of have this desire to win the division outright, which would be a good thing. And I think, they could win the first round no matter who they're playing. But I think the Pens would actually be a pretty solid opponent for them.
No, I agree with that, but it seems like Gallant's going full steam ahead now. So what I would wonder in this is, even though the Rangers don't get as advantageous of a matchup if they were to win the division, what happens with Carolina in that? Does that sort of damage their psyche a little bit? Because, Brendan Moore has built them up with all this confidence, and they had first place most of the year. I don't think any of us foresaw the Rangers possibly winning this division. I picked Carolina to win it. So we'll see. But this is a game that's going to matter. And this is a great litmus test for the Flyers, and especially their young players, because they're going to get an idea of playoff intensity in this game. And that's good for them.
It is. And, the Rangers played last night as well. So it's both teams coming off a back-to-back.
Yeah.
So I think, the scales are even on that front. And I do think that there's some prime opportunity for the Flyers to show what they can do against a team like this. But they're going to have to play their own game individually while actually having a system together to beat this kind of team. And that's something that the Flyers are not good at right now. And I think that's one of the biggest part of this challenge.
Yeah, and they're likely to face Georgiev, who's, again, no walk in the park. So that's something where, they've got to be mentally ready. They just have to be mentally ready to trade the physicality while not making mistakes and trying to be opportunistic. Like, I think that's the big thing. I know, I think it was Olivia that did an article on Owen Tippett in the Inquirer, and I just saw the headline, and it was just talking about how he's, trying to carve out a spot. This is a good game to try and carve out a spot because they're probably going to try and take his head off. And so, we'll see how that goes for him. This is going to be a challenge for him.
Absolutely. I'm actually kind of looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a fun game no matter what. And that, again, it's another opportunity to see what our young guys can do. And I think it should be a lot of fun.
A lot of fun. I think the fans will be into it. And if if the stands are not full because of Flyers fans, Rangers fans will travel for this one.
They always do. All right, we are going to switch gears and talk about our draft prospect of this week, who is Isaac Howard. Cannot wait to talk about him. Coming up next.
We've been talking about Built Bar for a long time on the show, and by now you know how much we love them. But Built has more than protein bars. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. Puffs are the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy, they're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar, they're a treat. Puffs are a fan favorite with some incredible flavors: yummy cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie. All Built Bars, including those Puffs, are covered in 100% real chocolate. Go to built.com and scroll down to the macros chart. You'll be blown away. High protein, low cal, high carb, high fiber, low carb. Most Built Bars contain 130 calories, 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Compare that to a candy bar, which usually has around 240 calories, 30 grams of sugar, and dozens of net carbs. They have so many delicious flavors like mint brownie, raspberry, and cherry barcia. New for this month, caramel almond delight. New flavors are coming out all the time. At Built Bar, they're all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, then figure out how to make it healthy. So go to built.com, use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com.
All right, so this week's prospect profile is about Isaac Howard, who is on the U.S. National Team Development Program squad in the USHL. He's a left wing. I wouldn't say he's small, but he's on the smaller side of center at 5'10". And last year, he skated on the U17 team for part of the season, the U18 team for part of the season. Extremely successful. He had in 34 games with the U17 team, 17 with the U18 team, 73 points, 32 goals, 41 assists. Prolific scorer here. He is currently the top scorer on the U18 team for the National Team Development Program. A very nice 69 points as of recording, and 52 games played, 25 goals, 44 assists. And it's interesting because he has slightly fewer points per game than Logan Cooley, who we've talked about on the show, but he is number 2 on the team on that stat. So again, these numbers are real, and he's absolutely known as a shooter, really good puck management, and he's committed to Minnesota Duluth for this fall, so that's not too shabby. And to me, he's one of these guys that in the conversation about this upcoming draft, we've not heard a lot about, I think, relative to some of the other guys in this batch of players in this tier we're looking at. And he's, for some reason, despite having this prolific scoring for the team, is projected late in the first round, maybe early second round on a lot of lists right now. So I guess, Russ, my first question is, why is he further down than some of these other cohorts of his?
So it's an interesting one because last year there was a lot of buzz about him. On my most current list, he's 19th. So that means he can go anywhere from like that spot to like 24, 25. So that does constitute as just about, late first round. I don't think he lasts in the second round. Whoever's got him in the second round's got it wrong. I will say that. But I think the issue here is just getting through the logjam of the spotlight of the other guys. I think teams have him ranked higher than pundits do. And I think they should. And I know he's going up on my list. I don't know to what degree, but every time I see him, he's always getting a breakaway or two. Every time I see him, he plays bigger than his 5'10" size. Every time I see him, he is making plays, like you said, in the offensive zone, smart plays. He's got a great wrist shot, which he can score from long distance. He's got a really good reach, and he's got terrific dekes. Like, he can get past you. I think you could talk about his defense needing help, and that's fine. I think you could talk about him needing to even get stronger, and that's fine. but the speed is there and the talent is there, and he could play with top line guys. And so, is he a top liner in the NHL? I don't know, but I think there's a long shot chance of that. I think maybe he's more like a second liner, but I think people have just not forgotten about him because everybody knows the name Isaac Howard for this draft. I think he's gotten lost in the shuffle. And I think that's something where, as we get closer to the draft, I think pundits will rediscover him and put him higher. But I think teams know what he is. And even though he's a winger and you always want to value centers, there's not a ton of centers that are actually going to play center in the NHL from this draft. They may say center now, but I always go back to Travis Konechny, who was listed as a center in the draft, and I knew he would never play center. Now, you never know which one of these will make it at center, but there's going to be a fair amount that don't. So I don't think you devalue him because of the left wing situation. I'm sure the size is part of this now because I think everybody is realizing that, the league wants to get bigger again. But that still
Right.
shouldn't take away a guy who has great speed and all this talent. So that's why I do rankings and not mock drafts. Because I think if a team falls in love with Isaac Howard, you could see him go in the top 15 picks. It would not shock me. And I wouldn't bat an eye if that happened.
Yeah, that is so interesting to me because again, you look at, the guys who are below him on that scoring list for the team, Frankie Nazar, you
hmm
see Cutter Gauthier, who we've
hmm
talked about on the
hmm
show, again, Logan Cooley, Rucker McGroarty, like all of these guys I've heard more and more, and I see, posts about articles about them. And so to me, this is a guy that you want to see if he's still on the board when you get a pick. Now, we've talked about this before because if you look at his projected, like let's just say he's mid late first round,
Okay.
right? That's not where the Flyers are going to be in this draft, ostensibly. We've talked about the possibility of making a trade to move up in the draft to get a second pick or making a trade down in the draft to get additional picks lower in the draft, like pick up a second rounder, maybe
Yeah.
an extra third rounder. And is he a guy that you think could fall to a position like that where the Flyers could take advantage of a deal?
Yeah, I do. I mean, so let's say they do trade and they get around 15, 16, 17. He'd be there. Most likely he'd be there. And that's a heck of an offensive talent to get there now. Depending on where that next pick is in the second round, who you're going to target there or what you're going to target there would be the key. At that point, if you got Howard in this spot, then maybe that's where you go get your defenseman because again, don't ever think you have enough defensemen. You don't. You never have enough defensemen. I think we're learning that. If we haven't learned that, everybody listening to the show should learn that. You could never have enough young defensemen. You
That
can't.
is true.
So if that's where they go and they get a 2-for-1, and in this draft, that could work out very well. Because honestly, I love Frank Nazar, and he's higher ranked because he's a center, and maybe you could say he's a little bit more of a game breaker. That's fine. I'm not going to argue
Hmm.
with any of that. But other than that, you could see points are pretty comparable between Nazar and Howard. And I think if I can foresee on a team where Howard fits in, where again, if I'm putting him with a center that likes to feed, likes to play make a little bit, you could put him, at that point, you might be talking about Noah Cates. You, you know,
Right.
that would work. So then if you're looking, for a defenseman, this draft has a lot of defensemen and a lot of different types to choose from. And that could be a good plan for the Flyers, honestly.
Yeah, I really like that idea a lot. And the more I think about it, the more I appreciate the idea of moving down in this draft to get some additional picks because I would much rather have a mid late first rounder in this draft, which is deep and like you said, has a ton of defensemen
Yep.
and get that second round pick and get another asset because
Yeah.
I think this year and next year missing that second rounder is I think a real disadvantage for the Flyers.
It's a disadvantage. And if I were in the front office, it would be a focus of mine to get that back for this draft. And if that's how I do it, then that's how I'm going to do it. But I'm not going to do it. Again, it's got to fit in for where it is on my board. But I think this could fit in on where it might be on their board.
And I think, I mean, I wouldn't say 100%, but I think it would be pretty ridiculous if the Flyers wound up with the number 1 pick overall and didn't take Shane Wright. But
I mean, I
trading
can't imagine.
down from the number 2 spot doesn't seem ridiculous to me, but from the number 1 spot it does.
Yeah, but
they're not likely to get either one of those. It's more likely going to be the 5-6 pick, like we've been talking about.
Right, that's where the odds are. But it's been a while since either the top pick or even the second pick has been traded. Like, that doesn't happen very often. And if you're the team that's doing it, there is a psychology here at work. I know, like, you're like, hey, second is a bad place to be in this draft because you'd rather be third. You'd rather let somebody else possibly make a mistake there or leave you something better than you thought would be there. I get that. But if you trade that pick and it doesn't work out for you with what you traded for, you will always be known as the team that traded that pick for slot in whatever big name you want in this draft.
Sure.
Maybe Logan Cooley or whatever. And that could be worse down the road. But, that's the risk.
Right. I mean, there's always risk to all of this.
Yes.
But, again, I think we've been showing, like Isaac Howard on this show, examples of players that have really good upsides, but just aren't as high in the rankings and are potentially worth trading down for. And I think it's an important option that Flyers fans should make sure we understand is still on the table.
Yeah. I think as a Flyers fan, you should have an open mind for things like that at this draft, just in case, because they're in a spot where they kind of need to get back a little bit more equity in this draft.
All right. Well, our fun thing to wrap up the show is a little video that's Isaac Howard highlights from this season. Some really fun goals in this one. Highly recommend you take a look. And that'll do it for today's show. We will be back again tomorrow. We're going to recap tonight's game against the Rangers, and we're going to have a mailbag. And we are recording that in the morning. So make sure that you get your questions in as early as possible today if you want them included in our mailbag for the week. And to do so, you can tweet us at LockedOnFlyers, or you can email us at lockedonflyers@gmail.com. I'm Rachel. I'm on Twitter at rmiriam. That's RMIRIAM.
I'm Russ. I'm at Sportsology, SPORTSOLOGY.
You made us your first listen today. Now make your next listen Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Hosts Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone help you become the expert of your fantasy league. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. Have a great day.